Morning. I'm Rick Talley with Netherlands Sewell. Happy to introduce our next presenting company, PetroTal Corp. PetroTal is Calgary-based with assets in the Bretaña field in Peru. Here to share their story is Manuel Zúñiga, the president and CEO. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back at Intercom after last year's lost year, actually we can call it. It's good to see some friends here. At PetroTal, we are very much committed to a project that will benefit everyone, from our shareholders to our neighboring communities. And on that regard, on this first slide, you can see a picture of the Bretaña oil field. And it's something that I like to highlight usually is the fact that you are in the middle of the Amazon jungle. This is the Ucayali River that, when it joins the Manuel River, forms the mighty Amazon River. In front of, across the river is the Pacaya-Samiria National Reserve. So we have to excel on environmental, social issues. The field is 10,000 acres large. We plan to develop the 3P reserve with 20 oil wells and a handful of water disposal wells. The oil wells are drilled to the north under the river or to the south. Most of them are going to be horizontal wells, and the water disposal wells are drilled to the flanks. And that allows us to keep our operations a very small. Footprint here is 11 hectares. That's all we do. Just to the east, you can see that's the Bretaña community, so we're adjacent to communities. On this following slide, gives you a quick overview of the company. Company was set up at the end of 2017. Listening to the GeoPark presentation just a few minutes ago, it dawned on me that actually what we're trying to accomplish is here in Bretaña is very similar to what they did in their block in Colombia, the CO34, on a net basis, from reserves and, more importantly, production, with the difference that we are intending to do the same, but in half the time, not counting, of course, the lost COVID year. The company nowadays have a market cap of about $170 million. Our enterprise value over EBITDA ratio is 1.3. So that's extremely low. And the reason for that, of course, is that last year when everybody was suffering from the COVID, we also had social issues. And more recently, Peru had national elections, and we have now a new quite leftist government. When the president gave his inaugural speech in July 28th, he made the comment that he wanted to make sure that companies that came to Peru to invest will do it for the benefit of everyone. And it was not only a matter of getting a social license. He was asking for the communities to be able also to share from the wealth that will come out. And very quickly in social media, they will say, that's the PetroTal model, and that's what we do. We talk about empowerment of the communities, and that's what we've been working on to be able to achieve that. In the company right now, we're producing close to 9,000 barrels of oil per day. We're drilling a horizontal well. With that, we expect to become the largest crude oil producer in Peru. Of course, everything is relative. We expect to be about 14,000 barrels of oil per day by mid-September. And, that tells you how little oil Peru produces. The key things about the company, we are a low-cost producer. There's no question about that. And when you have a single oil field, it's usually easier to manage your costs. But we're in the middle of the Amazon jungle, and even with that, we've been able to manage our costs very efficiently. We're growing production. And, you know, the goal has always been 20,000. As I will show you, now we're targeting 25,000 barrels because based on the recent wells that we drilled, even the water disposal, which was core and gave us outstanding data, one of the key parameters that we look at is the transition zone between the oil and the water, and you want that to be as flat as possible because that's more oil, and that's exactly what we have seen. So we're happy with that. The deviated well that we drilled, the 7D, is been performing outstandingly. And now that we are almost ready to complete the drilling on the 8H well, by tomorrow we should reach TD on a 4,200-meter well, out of which 1,100 meters are in the horizontal section. We see highly quality sands with high resistivities, indicating a good amount of oil. So with that, we are confident that we should be able to increase production, and our target is from now on is not only 20, but maybe 25,000. Out of Bretaña, we have been growing the reserves, and in the last reserve report, we had about more than 100 million barrels of 3P reserves. Our task then is to upgrade from the 3P to the 2P, from the 2P to the 1P, and we've been doing a good job at that. Started showing a beautiful picture of the Bretaña field and talking about ESG practices. And in Peru, especially if you work in the Amazon jungle, you don't only have to follow them, but you have to lead on them. And we do that, of course. We're always looking at opportunities, and we also have some exploration opportunities that we intend to drill. And if I have time, I'll show you some at the end of the presentation. The investment highlights are, very typical, but something that I'd like to highlight is how, we are, growing the 2P reserves, and we can move the reserves to producing reserves, and that's key for us. We have one single drilling rig, so we can only drill one well at a time. Our camp is small, as I mentioned. We need to keep a tight area, and therefore we cannot have 2 rigs or more rigs. But with that, given how strong these wells come in, allows us to increase production as we expect in the future. The history of the company, and soon we're going to run out of space highlighting every year, but something I usually like to highlight is the fact that the team has been executing almost flawlessly, notwithstanding what happened last year. And the reason for that is that when we raised initial equity at the end of 2017, we promised our investors that we were going to put the Bretaña oil field in production in less than a year for less than $25 million. And we did it in just 5 months. And at the end of the day, once all of the equipment was installed, was only $17.5 million. And we've been executing like that. Last year, of course, we had to stop the drilling campaign. Production went down some, and now we're picking up again. And the idea is to exit this year be closer to the 17,000 barrels per day, and then moving forward to the 25,000 in the future. I always highlight the ESG part. And for me, the key concept here is the empowerment of the communities. For the last several months, I've been visiting Lima. I've been visiting with some of the indigenous leaders to get to know each other. I was actually at Bretaña visiting with them, and it's good to hear them call me Brother Manolo. That's very significant in Peru, as you can imagine. And the reason is that we've been highlighting the fact that to be able to have the empowerment, they need the resources, but not only the resources from a cash point of view, but also to be able to manage those resources efficiently. And that's something that we've been working with them so they can do that. And I'm confident that we will be able to have Bretaña as a pilot project on how things should be done in Peru in the future. On the right-hand side, you see the part of the governance. Recently, the Ministry of Energy and Mines gave us a prize for the way we conduct the governance part, in the sense that we have people from the local communities inside the field, and checking the riverways and making sure that everything is done according to what we have agreed with them and with the government. And that openness from our side, it has really impacted the way we communicate with them and we interact with them. So on the sustainability highlights, and of course, nowadays everybody talks about, you know, the need to be neutral. We do have a plan to do that as well. And by 2035, we intend to be neutral, and I'm trying to expedite that. We're pushing forward the concept of solar power. We are actually investing money on all of the reports and designs to not only put solar powers inside the Britannia camp and the community, but also in the neighboring communities. So everybody will not only enjoy solar power, but enjoy power, which nowadays they don't have. So that's something, one of our main efforts nowadays. About Peru, I think that if you don't know about Peru, and you can read quite a bit lately because of the elections and what's happening now, I'm confident that the government will be able to manage things without going to extremes. And there is talk that the current president of the central bank will remain, and that be a good sign for the investors. So let's go to the Britannia field itself. And I mentioned that we have seen good results from the recent drilling campaign, although we have not yet put on production the 8H well. We see in the information that we gather that it should be an outstanding well. That gives us confidence that we should be targeting 20 wells in Britannia, which is the 3P case. And as you see on the bottom right hand side, the production forecast, it calls for 25,000 barrels per day. And that's what we are looking at. But internally, we look at a plateau of 10,000 as a strategic plateau, because given that we're in the Amazon jungle, with that amount of production, we're going to be free cash flowing for a long time. Actually, with more than 5,000, we should be able to free cash flow for a long, long time. And that's why the team is very eager to extend that plateau above 10,000 for as long as possible. We started with 8 years, and now, as you can see here, we're at 12 years, and that's a priority for the team. But of course, you know, reaching the 25,000 mark is also extremely important. Here you can see the history of how we developed the field in the last couple of years, and the impact of the COVID year, especially in the Q3. But we be ramping up nicely, and we continue to do that this quarter. And of course, the big jumps are going to be starting in the fourth quarter as the 8H comes in early September. Now, something that I usually like to highlight is the fact that we drill horizontal wells. We have also drilled some vertical or deviated wells, all depending on how close we are to the platform where we drill the wells. If we're too close, then you cannot drill a horizontal wells, of course. And you do see a big difference. Our horizontal wells use AICD water control valves that allows us to minimize the water breakthrough for several months, and then allows us to maximize the payout time. But even without that, the 7D well, that was a vertical well that was very close to the actual drilling rig, you know, paid out in a little more than a month. So these are very prolific wells. But you can see the big difference, and we have learned a lot. The one at the bottom line is the horizontal well drilled by Gargantiera in 2013-14, and you see the response of that well. That well taught us a lot on how to manage our horizontal wells, and I think we are doing a very good job. This 8H well that we are now completing the drilling. As I mentioned, by tomorrow we should be done drilling, and then we go 10 days of completion. And we are going to install not only these AICD valves to control the water breakthrough, but also have the ability to see where the fluids are coming from in the horizontal section. We're going to put some tracers and allowing us, and that's also going to give us quite a good amount of information, which then we can input into our reservoir simulation models and understand better the reservoir. But again, what we are seeing on this well is quite exciting, and we're excited that we are going to be able to go into the 3P well count. This is our forecast for the future. I just would like to highlight that there's been some delays on the drilling campaign, and this we put out at the beginning of the year. Some of that related to the COVID, and mobilizing crews and so on. It took an extra couple of weeks. All of that pushes things forward. So it looks like the last well on the approved budget is not going to be completed until early next year, and that, of course, is going to affect the last quarter. But it's still, we should be closer to that 17,000 mark that we see there as an average for the quarter. So now the company should be different. And that, for us, is very important because with those type of production, we are going to be able to prove to our investors that we can achieve the EBITDAs that we have been talking about for a long time, and hoping that the ratio, the enterprise value to EBITDA goes back to more typical of other companies. You can see also on the bottom right-hand side table that we were very conservative when we did this budget to make sure that we could have the ability to use the cash at hand to complete the entire budget. This is the field. I always highlight the fact, and by the way, I'm in slide 13 in case people are listening on the webcast. On the map to the south of the center of the field, you can see the 8H well on a white line. It gives you a sense of where we are located. The next well will be at 9H, and while this one, the 8H is 4,200 meters, the 9H will be 4,500 meters. As you see, we're reaching way to the north. And the recording factors that we continue to manage are, I believe, low, and the information we're gathering from the wells, I'm hoping that Netherland Sewell, that does the certification for us, we can get another bump this year, just like we've done in the last 3 years. We always pay attention to our 3-year forecast on cash because early in the year we were able to raise $100 million in bonds. So we pay a lot of attention to that. And here you can see that we are on a EBITDA basis with this type of profile. And this is based on the 2P case, we will have plenty of cash. And now we're starting to look at a 3P profile. This slide here shows you how small is our footprint. The central processing facilities are going to be ready in the 4th quarter. We're a little bit behind the schedule. Again, I know it's easy to blame the COVID, but that's the real reason. We have had to evacuate people from the field. We had some infections inside the field, even though we have a strict protocol, but it's quite difficult when you're in the Amazon jungle. Something that was extremely important for us to be able to secure the bonds early in the year was to highlight the fact that we can now export via Brazil. That 3rd export route was key. Without that, investors, I don't think, will be comfortable enough to rely on the Iquitos refinery and the pipeline. So right now, we are actually doing back-to-back exports of 240,000 via Brazil. And this is to show you what if something happens, how we can manage without the pipeline, because that's always been the concern. And we have been able to do that. We can store in barges. So we have the whole logistics well set up allowing us. If there is any issue that lasts for a few weeks, we should not see any difference in our production. We won't be able to shut down production at all. So on the financial highlight, this slide is on the cash side, on the bottom part of the table, we expect to see on the second quarter even a higher amount of cash. I usually like to highlight the net debt of just $25 million based on what we're expecting to see in the future, based on the EBITDA that we expect to get. And then just going back again to the comparison with our peers, you see that we are way below on the EV over cash flow. And I have explained to our board that we really need to prove to our investors that we can achieve that EBITDA this year of about $150 million, something in that order of magnitude. And I think that will give confidence to the investors that we can manage the operations in Peru successfully for the benefit of everyone, including, of course, the shareholders. You can see also on a free cash flow basis, always paying attention to the 3 years, which is the term of the bonds. And we cannot pay the bonds after the year 2, but as I will show you in the following slides, we will have plenty of cash to pay the bonds and even do an early payment of the bonds. And here you can see on a consolidated basis, what we expect to see at the end of the 3 years on the amount of cash. And this is based on May 10th street prices and how much money. So we can do dividends, we could do share repurchase, but we have to take care of the bonds first before we are allowed to do any of that. M&A, always looking for synergistic M&A opportunities that will enhance the value of the company, or a combination of all of those. On an OPEX basis, and this is something important, you can see that the different routes that we have, if we go to Iquitos, unfortunately the refinery is a small refinery in the jungle, but we get the best netbacks in Iquitos. Saramuro, that's the pipeline, that's the pump station number 1 in the pipeline. You see a netback of $36. And then when we go to Brazil, depending on the number of barges and so on, it's ranging between $33 and $37 the netbacks. And we're trying to optimize that. One way of doing that is unloading the barges into tanks at the port in Brazil, and then when the mother tanker comes in, we quickly can unload into the mother tanker, and that will save us a lot of money and hopefully bring us closer to the $37 range, which will put us even better than the pipeline, which truly it will be outstanding. But having that flexibility has made a big difference for us. Now, to complete the presentation, I want to highlight a couple of things on the exploration side. On Block 95, the main focus, of course, is Bretaña and trying to squeeze as much oil out of that field. Right now, we have 8 oil wells producing. We're now targeting 20. So we still have a long way to go to fully develop the field. But if you look at to the south, leads E and D, we are now getting the environmental permit to do some seismic and drill those 2 leads. And our experience in the jungle is that, if you are successful, usually those 2 leads end up being a single one. And if that is the case, you look at the amount of the mean reserves, that looks very much like a Bretaña oil field. So that'll be outstanding to have already logistics set up in Bretaña and then basically doubling the reserves with those 2 leads. And then in Block 107, and this is one that we expect to get the environmental permit by next quarter and drill the Constitución prospect, which is adjacent to a brand new road. And to the north of us, about 60 miles north, you see the Los Angeles field, that the way they export that oil is by truck to Pucallpa, and then by river, and they take it to the Iquitos refinery. Their barges, and that field is owned by CEPSA, actually go by our field. We see their barges floating by our field, and we will do exactly the same. But this type of oil, which we expect to be 40, 45 API gravity, will be ideal as a blending agent. Right now, the natural gasoline that we buy from the Iquitos refinery adds close to $2 to our OPEX. So if we can use our own oil, that will be outstanding for us. Thank you so much.